Employees are increasingly using AI, and their employers are increasingly encouraging them to do so, building their own company chatbots and training their staff in how best to use the technology. You might think this would all be feeding through into corporate profits and boosting the economy. So why isn't it? Welcome to the Chicago Booth Review podcast, where we bring you groundbreaking academic research in a clear and straightforward way. I'm Hal Weitzman, and today I'm talking with Chicago Booth's Anders Humlum. His research documents the paltry effects that AI is having on company earnings and economic growth. Is it just too early, or will AI's economic impact turn out to be overrated? Anders Humlum, welcome to the Chicago Booth Review podcast.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're here to talk about your research about AI and why it isn't exactly setting the economy on fire yet. Anyway, your research, this paper was written about Denmark. Why? I know you're from Denmark, so obviously it's nice to have an excuse to go back. But why is Denmark particularly important or useful for studying this phenomenon?
Yeah, absolutely. So this project is on the arrival of AI chatbots, really motivated by the rapid diffusion of ChatGPT and the similar tools that are really part of the workplace now. Denmark is really a fantastic setting to study the arrival of these tools in the workplace for several reasons. The first being that the Danish workforce have been on the forefront of the adoption of these tools, with adoption rates similar to the US setting. So I think a lot of the lessons that we'll learn from the Danish settings are directly applicable to the US economy and most other Western economies. The second being an amazing availability of data. So we collaborated with Statistics Denmark, which enabled two fantastic opportunities. First, every Dane has a digital mailbox the government uses to send tax documents, for example, other important documents. When I lived in Denmark, I had a digital mailbox. Statistics Denmark can send survey invitations through these digital mailboxes, which means that we can really run large-scale representative surveys, and we can even target these surveys to the occupations where these chatbots are relevant. So we get a large sample in occupations such as software developers, teachers, HR professional, accountants, and so forth. And then in terms of the labor market, so we're interested not only in understanding the take-up of these tools, but also the implications for the labor market. And here we can link these survey responses to fantastic data, administrative data, on workers' earnings, their hours, their wages. So this is really the gold standard of labor market outcomes. So we can really assess whether these tools have made a difference. So I'm a labor economist. I want to know, do these things matter in terms of earnings, in terms of productivity? And I think this data set really offers a fantastic opportunity to take stock and look at the evidence.
And so, as you said, companies in Denmark are investing in AI. What exactly are they investing in?
Most employers are now really taking active actions in terms of first explicitly encouraging their employers to use these tools. In many workplaces, it is an expectation that workers are leveraging these tools in their daily.
How are they encouraging them?
Yeah, so they're not just putting up usage policies; they're actually putting their money where their mouth is. So first, around a third of employers have their own chatbot. So this is a version of ChatGPT often, but that is customized such that it integrates more seamlessly into the workflow of the particular workplace, making it easier for employees to take advantage of this.
So a third of the companies have developed that?
Yeah, have some version of their...
Do you know how that compares to other countries?
So again, that's where actually on the employer side, we have very limited evidence on generative AI adoption, and this is the first set of evidence along these lines. I couldn't see why it wouldn't generalize to other settings. I think these tools are really becoming pervasive and very, very general, a part of the general tool set in many knowledge work professions. Second, we see that, and I was stunned by this statistic. 1/4 of employees in these occupations have received training into how to use the tool. So the neat thing with chatbots is
So
that,
just to clarify, so they've received training on how to use their own internal tool, or generally?
Generally, yeah. So it could be either or. We could split it, but I think in general, employers have now offered training courses into how to start prompting. The nice thing with these chatbots is that it actually doesn't require a lot of training to get started. A one-day course is often more than enough. You can even use the chatbot to teach you how to start prompting. So in that sense, that seems like a straightforward thing for employers to do, and indeed we see that a quarter of employees have already received this type of training.
Okay, so they're investing in it. They're building their own. They're encouraging people to take these training courses. And then we've covered, at Chicago Booth Review, we've covered some of your earlier research about who's adopting AI, right? And what we basically found, if I can summarize that, was generally it's younger people, less experienced, higher achieving workers. Women were quite significantly less likely than men to use it. Is that what you found here? Is that replicated here in this study as well?
Yeah, those inequalities were replicated. So we did 2 survey rounds. So the first round was just a year after the arrival of ChatGPT, where we saw these large inequalities emerging. And these inequalities were replicated in the second round, which was exactly 2 years after the arrival of ChatGPT this winter. We see that these gaps in adoption are still with us today. Women are significantly less likely to use the tool relative to a comparable man in the same occupation. We can even compare co-workers in the same workplace, and at least a 10 percentage point gap remains in their adoption rates.
Does that apply even after they've had training?
Yeah, so that's the new thing in this new study, is that we show that employers can actually do something about these gaps. When employers are providing training, these gaps, and in particular, or especially the gender gap, really shrinks. So you can halve the gender gap by offering training courses. So we see this, that the employer,
even though, as you said, the training is not really strictly necessary, because you could train yourself quite easily.
Yeah, I think it's something about setting explicit expectations that we want you to use it. I think, and then a second, giving people that nudge to start using it, and then we can see that women really step up the game and close a lot of the gap. So I think that's I was very encouraged to see this, that even though there are these gaps, employers, firms, policymakers can actually do something about it, and it seems that training in particular seems quite effective in closing these gaps.
So one of your findings was that AI helped workers save time. That makes sense. How much time? And what was the kind of variation between different jobs?
Yeah.
Who's saving more time?
So on average, in these 11 so-called exposed occupations, these are occupations where it's actually relevant to use AI chatbots, we found an average time savings of around 3%. So that varied both across occupations and across workplaces, depending on whether employers were actually also investing in the tools. So some of the occupations with the largest time savings were, for example, programmers, software developers, marketing.
They're using it to write code?
They're using it to write code, and that was one of the first use cases of these large language models, is that they can really speed up coding. So this is really a part of the tool set of any software developer, I would say. Marketing professionals, HR professionals.
Writing copy.
Writing copy, yeah. So this is really kind of bread and butter for these large language models is writing ads or job posting for HR
Right,
professional.
right. Job descriptions,
Yeah.
right.
So for these occupations, especially in the workplaces where they're encouraged to use it, the time savings were larger, more on the order of 7%.
So that would be for the coders and for the marketers and
Yeah.
HR people?
Yeah. So these are the occupations and workers with the largest time savings and productivity gains in the economy from these large language models. At the lower end of the spectrum, we have a bunch of occupations where these tools are still relevant, but they're not saving as much time. For example, teaching. I use ChatGPT every day. I love it. Teachers have also taken it up, but their reported time savings are much smaller, more on the order of 1% of the total work hours.
Do you know what they're using it for?
I can tell you what I'm using it
Okay,
for.
yeah.
I use it to prepare lectures. I use it for research. I think it's a great learning tool. You can also use it to assist in principle grading essays. There are many use cases for chatbots for a teacher. Of course, they cannot
So
automate.
you use it to grade the essays, which presumably the students are writing using ChatGPT.
Yeah, you
So
can just like fully
just
automate
put
it.
two agents together and we don't need to be involved. Here's your degree.
Yeah, so that is actually interesting. There's a lot of teachers that say that they're now also spending time detecting whether their students are using these tools, potentially cheating on their
And
exams.
they're using ChatGPT to detect whether the students are using ChatGPT?
Potentially.
Yeah. Okay, so in some jobs it's pretty obvious the way you talk about it. I mean, they're basically writing jobs, whether you're writing code,
Yeah.
copy, or job descriptions.
Yeah.
And presumably we could think about like lawyers. I don't know if that's part of your sample.
Yeah,
you know?
legal professionals. We both have paralegals and lawyers in the sample. They fall somewhere in between the teachers and marketing professionals, in the sense that they reap on average like 3 to 4% time savings. There are specific barriers to all occupations. For legal professionals, the factuality, whether
Right.
they are actually
Sure.
correct what these large language models are spitting out is a key stumbling block for
But
lawyers.
it helps them with the boilerplate or
Yeah.
the small print or whatever, that kind of thing, right? So those are the sort of white-collar office jobs. That's why
Yes.
I guess teacher doesn't quite fit into it's not an office job in the same way. And presumably, I'm guessing if you're a welder or a plumber
Yeah.
or a carpenter, it's much less useful. So this is kind of what we would expect, that office, office jobs, white-collar jobs are the ones that are finding this most useful right now.
Yeah.
And so companies are investing in this. There's widespread adoption. There is time being saved. But what you find is it's not feeding through into earnings. Why is that?
Yeah.
Or
And I think
explain
that's
what's
the-
happening maybe first. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, that's the core contribution of this paper, is that we collect all this survey evidence, and this is really large scale. We have 25,000 responses that we now can link to the administrative tax records of these workers, and we can ask and answer whether adopters have fared better in the labor markets. If they are becoming more productive, do we see it manifesting in higher earnings, higher productivity, changed work hours? And here the key finding is that chatbots have really not made a difference for earnings, for hours, for wages. We have so much data that we can reject even small effects. Like effects larger than 1% on these outcomes, we can reject. So chatbots have really not made a significant impact on labor market outcomes. We can even look at the trajectories of these workers and see, are they trending better at least? That could provide some signs that maybe in the longer run they'll do better. The trends are flat. So that to me that's an early indication that even in the medium run we should maybe not expect these tools to be very transformative in terms of labor market outcomes.
And as in the first half of the show, we talked about how, your big finding was that even though people are using chatbots. They're saving time. They're not generating more earnings for their organizations using those chatbots. Why? Why is that? Why do you think that hasn't shown up yet? Or is it that it's just yet we're early on in the cycle? What do you think is going on?
Yeah, I was personally surprised, I must say. There is really good evidence from experiments showing that these tools do have remarkable potential to boost productivity. And that stands in very stark contrast to the zero effects we find in our administrative data in the real economy. And I think there are two reasons why we don't see it showing up in earnings. The first is that the productivity gains we observe in the real economy are modest and significantly smaller than what people have found in experiments. And the second thing is that even though we do find some time savings, there's a very weak pass-through to earnings. And the pass-through is particularly weak in workplaces where it's not encouraged. Our evidence point to...
Not discouraged, just not encouraged.
Not encouraged. There is very few workplaces now that explicitly bans ChatGPT and chatbots. These are mostly banks that are handling very confidential data, or legal professionals where being correct is a first order importance. Just not encouraged seems to weaken this pass-through from productivity to earnings. And our evidence point to a couple of reasons why that link to earnings might be weak. The first one is that even though chatbots might save you some time on existing tasks, like, for example, I use it to draft a document, draft an email, it speeds up that process. Whether it really boosts earnings depends on what do I use that time savings for. And can I reallocate that time to a task where I'm actually productive or not? And I think that the answer to that question really depends on whether employers are encouraging it and whether employers have started to change workflows in response to these chatbots. And we see that workers in the workplaces where they're encouraged, they're better able to take on more work now that they're more productive. And I think that is the mechanism for which I expect these tools to affect earnings in the long run, is that workers are able to do more, or they're able to shift their work towards tasks where they have higher value added. But we just see limited evidence of that thus far.
Okay, but your suspicion is that that's sort of the next step.
Yeah, that's the next step. I see the arrival of chatbots have been fascinating because it's really been this bottom-up adoption process where workers have just started using it. Many of them without the permission or the encouragement of their employers. But what I see now, the next step is that employers are now getting on board and starting to invest in the tools, starting to reorganize workflows in response to these, in response to the chatbots and the productivity potential in it. And we see that when employers are investing, both adoption rates are much higher and the benefits are larger. So the time savings are larger, they're better able to take on more work, and I think that's the mechanism for which these tools might become transformative in the medium to long run.
Okay, so it's interesting because, there's a lot of predictions out there about how AI is going to transform work. So it's early, but so far it's not quite living up to its billing.
I was surprised. I must say, personally, I love ChatGPT. I use it all the
time.
Yeah. But I was also, in some sense, negatively surprised by the fact that it has really not affected outcomes.
Yeah.
I think it's important to cut through the hype and actually look at the economic outcomes. And when we look at the hard metrics, it has really not made a difference. And it doesn't seem like it's trending at all either, which also suggests to me that maybe this finding of small labor market effects will stick for a while.
Okay, so you write in your research about productivity J-curve. Do you think that there's, in other words, it's going to really take off at some point? Do you think that that's coming? And if so, does your research suggest it might be further out than was anticipated or something like that?
I think there's an understanding, especially among economic historians, that these processes take a lot of time. And I think this is really where history is very valuable. Going back to the steam engine or electricity, it took several decades before we really harnessed the full potential of these very transformative tools. And I think large language models falls into that category of general purpose technologies where it will take a lot of time before we really see the large productivity gains manifesting in the economy. The reason why I was still surprised is that there are very well executed experiments showing remarkable effects in a very short period of time. So if you had just taken that evidence and extrapolated to the economy, you would expect it to show up in the economic outcomes we observe, but we don't. So that's why I still think these technologies have tremendous potential, and the fact that people are really adopting it is, in some sense, confirming that. But in terms of the economic outcomes, productivity, earnings, I think it will take longer time than people might anticipate before this really making a difference.
Yeah, you talk about two different things there. Productivity and earnings are kind of, they're different, aren't they? And a lot of the concern about AI is that it won't help workers boost their productivity. It will just, the companies will focus on profits, not earnings, and so they'll just get rid of workers, and that's how they'll use AI to improve productivity not by giving people more tasks to do, but by giving them nothing to do and getting rid of them, and that's how they'll improve their profit. So I don't know if you feel like this sheds any light on that debate, because the other counterpart, I guess, is no, AI will be great. We'll all be doing more, and we won't be doing boring things like drafting, boilerplate language. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very valid concern, and actually something where the Danish data is also fantastic, because we can link these responses up to the workplace level. So we can look at workplaces that have adopted these tools faster. And there is tremendous variation across workplaces, even within very narrow occupations. Some marketing companies have really jumped into these tools, and they provide an early sign of, well, do they then start laying off workers or freeze hiring? We don't find any evidence of that. High adopting workplaces have not fared differently in terms of their total wage bill, in terms of total employment. And we can also look at incumbent workers. That's something you might worry about, is that for example, customer support agents, that now the incumbents, those that were before chatbots arrived, they're laid off, and then it's just fully automated by AI chatbots answering these customer inquiries. We don't find any evidence of that. So again, both at the worker level as well as at the firm level, it seems that the impacts are much smaller than some might have anticipated, and that it will take a longer time.
So we don't need to fear the chatbots?
I think that's a positive spin of this set of evidence, is that there's still time to act. There's
even for an old man like me. So, and you talk about some of the new job tasks that are going to come from AI. What are some examples?
Yeah. So in the short run, there is a lot of work that goes into just integrating these tools into the workplace. So teachers are now adapting their exams in order to take into account tool usage. Legal professionals are now drafting new legal policies in response to these chatbots. Workers are also now shifting more gears towards overseeing the quality of AI-generated output. So this could be, for example, an IT support specialist. Now, instead of drafting the initial response to some worker or to some customer, now it's a chatbot that drafts that initial response, but then the specialist is there to oversee the quality of their output. So more being kind of a middle manager than being on the lower level.
So the future is we're all going to be managers.
I think we're all going to be managers of chatbots. That's I think that's what we are heading towards.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to leave it. The future of management will be everyone. It would be great for Chicago Booth, because everybody will have to come here to get their MBA. Anders Humlum, thank you very much for coming on the Chicago Booth Review podcast.
Thank you.